He doesn't even put down his coffee when he says it. "You're good at what you do, Victoria." My boss leans back in his chair, perfectly relaxed, like he's commenting on the weather. "But let's be realistic. You don't really have a future here." I am standing in front of his desk with the quarterly performance report in my hands. The one I stayed up preparing. The one showing our department just had its strongest numbers in 2 full years. Numbers I built, account by account, late evening by late evening, client call by client call. He barely glances at it. "Some people are just better suited staying where they are," he adds. He says it the way a doctor delivers a diagnosis, calm, certain, final. Then his eyes drift back to his computer screen like the conversation is already filed away. For a second the room feels like it has shifted. Not loudly, just a small, quiet tilt you feel in your chest before your brain catches up. I have been at this company for 6 years. I have given it early mornings and late Fridays and weekends solving problems that were never officially mine. And he just told me it meant nothing. I thank him. I pick up the report. I walk out, but something that was sitting still inside me has just started moving. The hallway feels longer on the way back. I pass 3 coworkers. They look up. I give the smile people give when they want to signal that everything is normal. They look back down. The office keeps doing what it always does. Keyboards clicking, phones murmuring, someone laughing too loudly near the printer. Nobody knows what just happened in that office. I sit down at my desk. My screen shows the same open documents I left 20 minutes ago, a client proposal halfway finished, an email I had been drafting, a spreadsheet with next quarter's targets in careful rows. I look at all of it and feel something settle into me that I can only describe as clarity. Not anger. I want to be precise about that. Anger is hot, loud, the kind that wants to break things. What I felt was colder and quieter. It was the feeling of a decision forming. Very still, very solid. My boss had just told me that the ceiling he had decided for me was permanent. That I should accept it. That my value to this company would stay exactly where it was forever. He believed I would take that verdict and keep working. He was right about the working part. He was wrong about everything else. Before I tell you what happened next, let me tell you what was really going on in that building. People who say, "You have no future here," usually believe one thing deeply, that you will never leave. The words are not a verdict on your talent. They are a bet on your inertia. My boss said I had no future at the company, then a competitor offered me something he couldn't match. My name is Victoria Hale. For 6 years I worked as a senior account coordinator at a consulting firm called Veritas Partners. My job was to manage the relationships and operational details that kept our most important clients coming back. I was not the loudest person in the building. I was not the one with the boldest vision statements or the most polished slides. I was the one who actually knew the clients, knew what they needed before they said it, knew which problems were forming before they broke through, knew how to have the difficult conversations that kept contracts from collapsing. My boss, Grant Hollenbeck, was good at the visible things. At talking to leadership. At packaging results in language that sounded strategic. He was excellent at standing in front of a room and making everything sound bigger and smoother than it was. He needed me to make sure it was actually true. He just never told me that. 6 years ago, getting the job at Veritas Partners felt like something genuinely good happening. I had come from 2 smaller firms where the work was real but the ceiling was exactly as low as it looked from the outside. Veritas was different, mid-sized, established, working with clients who had real stakes and real expectations. My title was Senior Account Coordinator. The job description was a clean paragraph. The actual job was much larger and everyone who had been there more than 3 months understood this without being told. I spent my first 2 weeks watching. Not passively, actively. I mapped the informal processes, the ones that existed in people's habits instead of any written procedure. I identified where things were most likely to slip through gaps. I paid attention to what clients actually cared about versus what we were officially delivering. What I found was a department with strong relationships and thin documentation. Strong people and fragile systems. A lot of success held together by a few people who understood, in precise detail, how the whole thing worked. I became one of those people inside my first year. It happened because I paid attention and because I cared about the work being right. Neither of those things ever made it into my performance reviews. The invisible work is the hardest kind to explain to someone who doesn't do it. I am not talking about working late, though I did plenty of that. I am talking about the category of work that doesn't produce anything you can point to, because what it produces is the absence of problems. The client call I made on a Tuesday when I noticed a small contract inconsistency, a call that took 40 minutes and prevented a dispute that would have taken 3 months to resolve. That call never appeared in any report. The proposal I restructured late on a Thursday because it had been handed to me broken, missing the language one client's legal team had approved in the previous cycle. The fixed proposal landed on time. No one asked how it got fixed. The account I saved in year 3 by catching a billing error before the client saw it, spending 2 days coordinating a correction across 2 departments. The account renewed. My boss presented the renewal in an all-hands meeting. He mentioned the client team. He mentioned the long-term relationship. He didn't mention me. I noticed. I continued working. That was the pattern, and I lived inside it for 6 years because I believed that consistent performance would eventually produce something. I was right. I was just wrong about what it would produce and where. Within my first 2 years, something happened that I didn't plan but that turned out to be the most important thing in the story. The clients started coming to me directly. Not through official channels. Directly. Personal cell numbers exchanged after difficult situations resolved well. Emails that started, "I'm reaching out to you specifically because," rather than to the department inbox. I did not cultivate this deliberately. I just consistently did what I said I would do, told the truth about timelines, and treated their concerns as things that actually mattered instead of problems to be managed at a comfortable distance. That consistency, over time, became something real. Grant was always the official face of the department. His name was on presentations. He attended the executive dinners. When clients were introduced to Veritas formally, they met Grant. But when those clients had a real problem, when something had gone wrong and they needed someone who would give them a straight answer and then actually follow through, they called me. I built those relationships across 5 major accounts over 6 years. Each represented real revenue. Each represented a person on the other side who trusted me in a specific, personal way. Grant saw this. He called it rapport. What he missed was that rapport, at that level, is not a nice feature. It is the whole structure. Trevor joined the department in my 4th year. He was 26, confident, and had the particular quality of someone who had learned early that enthusiasm in front of the right people produces results. He was not untalented. He had a quick mind and real energy and worked hard in the visible ways. He also understood, almost immediately, what I had spent 4 years not fully understanding, that Grant rewarded people who made him look good in front of leadership, and that making him look good was a different skill from being good at the actual work. Within Trevor's first 6 months, the department's meeting structure changed. Presentations I had been running were reassigned to Trevor. He delivered them well, because I had spent weeks building the underlying analysis, and delivering a well-built analysis is considerably easier than building it. Grant praised Trevor constantly, specifically, publicly, in the ways that build reputations inside organizations. He praised me occasionally, generically. Victoria is solid. Victoria handles the details well. Detail. That word covered 6 years of work. I watched this unfold and kept doing the work. I told myself genuine performance was a durable foundation. I believed that right up until the year Grant told me I had no future. The promotions had been the first signal, years before the conversation in his office. My first performance review was strong. My second was strong. My third contained the first version of a phrase that would become familiar. Victoria excels in her current role and we want to continue leveraging her strengths here. Leveraging her strengths here. I read it the first time and accepted the framing. I read it the second time and noticed the pattern. I read it the third time and understood it was not a description of my development trajectory. It was a description of a decision already made. Trevor was promoted in his 2nd year. A title change and a salary increase, announced at a team meeting with language about his leadership potential and strategic vision. In my 5th year I brought up advancement directly. Specific projects, specific outcomes, specific comparisons between what I was delivering and what senior level roles required. Grant listened patiently, said I was invaluable, Said he would create more visibility opportunities for me. Said the timing needed to be right. I left that meeting and wrote down every word he had said. Not out of suspicion. Out of the habit of a person who had spent 5 years learning that documentation was the only reliable record of what actually happened. The account that defined my 6th year was Harrow Logistics. Grant assigned it to me in January. I understood what the assignment meant without being told. The account was in trouble, the relationship had been deteriorating for months under inconsistent management, and the contract renewal was 9 months away. Someone needed to fix it before the client walked. That someone was me. I spent 6 months rebuilding Harrow from the inside. New communication rhythms. Resolved issues that had been sitting in a queue for months. Rebuilt trust with their operations director, a careful woman named Priya Sandoval, through the unglamorous work of following through on every single thing I said I would do. By month 4, Priya was calling me directly. By month 6, she was describing our working relationship to her own leadership as the reason the account was worth continuing. Grant attended the renewal meeting. He ran the presentation. He shook hands with the senior team. Afterward, he sent a company-wide email about the successful renewal and the strong departmental performance that had produced it. My name appeared once in a list of contributors. 3 months later, in his office, he told me I had no future. I held the performance report with Harrow's numbers on it. He barely looked at it. The day after the "no future" conversation, I did something I had never done before. I sat at my desk during my lunch break and looked at my 6 years of work with a specific question in mind. What is this actually worth? Not to Grant, not to Veritas Partners, to the market. I traced 5 years of client communications. I documented the accounts I had saved, the renewals I had secured, the relationships that continued specifically because of me. I was not building a case for Grant. I was done building cases for Grant. I was building clarity for myself. And what I found, when I looked honestly at the picture, was something I had been avoiding seeing for years. The value I had created was not internal. It was not bound to Veritas Partners or Grant Hollenbeck or the department org chart. It existed in specific relationships with specific people who trusted me in a personal and professional way. That trust was mine. I had built it. It would move with me anywhere I chose to take it. Priya Sandoval at Harrow Logistics. 2 contacts at Renwick Financial. The lead at Castleford Group. They did not belong to the company. They belonged to the relationship. And the relationship was mine. The message arrived 11 days after the office conversation. I was at my desk finishing a client brief when my personal phone showed a message from a number I didn't recognize. Brief. Professional. The kind of message that has been thought about before it was sent. Hi Victoria. This is Daniel Forsyth, partner at Northbridge Consulting. I've been following your work on several accounts over the past year. I'd genuinely like to have a conversation if you're open to it. No pressure at all. I read it twice. What stopped me was following your work on several accounts. Not, I saw your LinkedIn profile. Specifically my work. Specifically accounts. There was only one account whose results had been visible enough to reach someone outside the company in any meaningful way. Harrow Logistics. The turnaround I had built. The renewal that Grant had presented as a departmental win while my name appeared once in a list. Someone on the outside had been watching the right things. I thought about the conversation in Grant's office. About the performance report. About no future. Then I typed back that I was open to a conversation. We scheduled a call for Thursday evening. I did not tell anyone at work. I went to my afternoon meeting, answered my emails, and finished the client brief. But something in me was paying a different kind of attention now. The Thursday call lasted 50 minutes. Daniel Forsyth ran Northbridge's client services division. He spoke with the directness of someone who had made enough decisions to know that clarity is more valuable than polish in conversations that actually matter. He mentioned Harrow Logistics by name in his second sentence. He described the account's turnaround in terms that showed he understood, in specific operational detail, what had actually changed and why, not the summary version, not the language Grant had used in his company-wide email, but the real mechanics of it. He mentioned 2 other accounts by name. Both were accounts where I had been the primary point of contact and where the results had been strong and quiet in the way that real operational work is always quiet. He asked me 3 questions, the 3 most direct questions about my actual work that anyone in a professional context had asked me in years. Not about my title, not about my reporting structure, about what I actually did and how I actually thought. By the end of the call he said he wanted to meet in person. "I have something I want to show you," he said. "I'd rather do it face to face." I said yes. The meeting was set for the following Tuesday. The Northbridge offices were quieter than I expected. Not empty, there were people working, the hum of an operating organization, but with the focused quality of a place designed for actual thinking rather than performance. Daniel met me at reception and walked me to a corner room with a round table. 2 other people were already inside. He introduced them, Audra Levin, the firm's managing director, and a senior account strategist named Marcus Wren. They had done their homework. That was evident before Daniel said a second sentence. He opened a folder. Inside were printed summaries, not my resume, which I had not sent, but documented outcomes from the accounts I had managed. The Harrow Logistics renewal, the Renwick retention, the Castleford expansion, each with specific figures, specific timelines, specific descriptions of what had changed. "We've been building this picture for about 14 months, Daniel said. We wanted to understand whether what we were seeing from the outside matched what was actually happening inside." Audra spoke next. "What we were seeing from the outside was work at a leadership level being carried out by someone without a leadership title." She let that sit for a moment. "We want to change that," she said. "What they put on the table was not what I expected." Senior Operations Director. A new client services division Northbridge was building from the ground up, focused on logistics and supply chain accounts, the exact sector where most of my 6 years of deep client knowledge lived. Full authority to design the service model. Full authority to build the team. Direct reporting to Audra with no intermediate management layer between my decisions and the division's direction. And a compensation package that was, by my quick calculation, slightly over double my current salary. I kept my expression neutral and looked at the document carefully. Not performing consideration, actually doing it. Because an offer that seems too good can mean several things and not all of them are good, and I had spent 6 years learning to read the difference between substance and presentation. What I saw, looking carefully at each element, was substance. I had one question I sat with before I asked it. What does failure look like here, and what happens when it occurs? Audra answered without hesitation. She described 2 previous divisions that had underperformed and what the firm had done about it. People who tell you the honest version of failure are telling you something important about how they operate. Take whatever time you need, she said. I did not make the decision that evening. I spent 5 days on it. Deliberately, methodically, the way I approached every significant decision, by identifying what I actually knew, what I was assuming, and what I needed to verify. I sent Daniel 4 questions over email. About the firm's financial position. About the timeline for the division launch. About clients already committed and realistic first-year projections. About decision-making authority in practice versus on paper. His answers were direct and complete. He did not smooth over uncertainties. He described what was known and what was not, what was committed and what was projected. I also had a conversation I had been thinking about for days. I called Priya Sandoval on a Friday evening from my personal phone. I told her I was considering a significant career change and that I wanted her to hear it directly from me. I told her it would likely take me to a different firm with a logistics and supply chain focus. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that settled the decision completely. I've been wondering when this would happen, she said. Not with drama, just with the measured certainty of someone who had been paying attention to something for a long time. The decision was already made. The call confirmed it. Priya told me Harrow's internal leadership had been discussing the service relationship for about 3 months. Not dissatisfied exactly, but concerned about trajectory, about what happened to the account if I were no longer the person managing it. We've been in situations before where we built a strong relationship with a specific person at a firm and then that person changed roles, she said. We effectively started over with someone who didn't know us. It's disruptive in ways that are hard to explain. She asked me directly, if I moved, would I be in a position to continue the relationship? I told her I was considering a role at a firm with direct logistics sector relevance. That if I moved, the relationship would depend on her interest in continuing it in a different context. She was quiet for a moment. Send me information about Northbridge, she said. Not marketing. Operational. What the team looks like, what the service model would be. I told her I would have that within 2 weeks. I called Daniel the next morning. I told him I was ready to accept, with one condition. The conversation about Harrow Logistics would happen properly, transparently, and on the client's timeline after my departure was complete. He said he had expected nothing less. I accepted Northbridge's offer the following Monday. I spent a week preparing before I said anything at work. I understood how resignations travel in buildings like that one. How quickly the temperature can change, how the perception of someone who had handed in their notice could shift overnight from reliable colleague to on the way out. I did not want those dynamics to touch my accounts or my clients before I had handled the transition properly. I built transition documents for every active account. Not thin summaries, real documents. Client preferences, relationship history, current open items, outstanding risks, specific notes on the communication style each client responded to. The kind of documentation that takes time to build and that most people in my position would not bother building for a company that had just told them they had no future. I built them anyway, because the clients deserved a proper transition. Because the work had always mattered to me independent of what Grant Hollenbeck thought about it. I gave my resignation on a Tuesday. Grant laughed. Not a cruel laugh, the kind people let out when they are surprised and cover it with something light. You'll regret leaving stability, he said, with the certainty of a man who had confused his own management decisions with the natural order of things. He did not ask why I was leaving. I returned to my desk and kept working. The 2 weeks that followed were the most thorough of my career. I completed every open item. I updated every document. I held handover meetings with the colleagues who would be absorbing my accounts. I sent personal departure notes to each of my major client contacts, warm, professional, expressing genuine gratitude for the relationships. To Priya I sent a note that was slightly different. Still professional, still warm, but with a line at the end telling her the conversation we had discussed was ready to proceed at whatever pace worked for Harrow. Her reply arrived within the hour. She said she was ready. I started at Northbridge on a Monday. The first week was orientation in the real sense, understanding the firm's existing client relationships, meeting the team members who would form the new division, beginning to map the operational architecture for how the logistics practice would run. Daniel gave me full access to everything immediately. The financials, the client pipeline, the personnel files for the team I would be building. He treated me from day one as someone making decisions rather than someone being managed through them. The difference between that and my previous 6 years was not subtle. On Thursday of my first week, Priya sent the formal notification to Veritas Partners. Harrow Logistics was transitioning its account relationship. Northbridge was the incoming provider. Inside Veritas Partners, the notification landed hard. I was not present for it. But a former colleague who was careful about what she shared with me gave me a general picture. The notification arrived on a Thursday, 2 days before a quarterly leadership presentation at which Grant had been scheduled to present Harrow Logistics as a flagship account success. The revenue Harrow represented was not a small line item. It was a significant piece of the department's projections for the coming year. When leadership looked at the revenue model and found a large section of it suddenly in transition, questions began moving upward. The questions produced a documentation review. The review found my transition materials, thorough, organized, exactly as I had left them. It found the account history. The renewal I had built. The relationship I had developed with Priya. The specific operational work that had turned the account around. It found, in short, a complete and accurate picture of where the account had actually come from. Grant had been presenting that account's success for months. The documentation showed clearly who had built it. The name on most of it was mine. The review widened. It covered not just Harrow but the other accounts in the department, their stability, their renewal histories, the specific personnel most responsible for their health. The pattern across multiple accounts was consistent. The actual relationship work and operational outcomes traced back to one person. That person's contributions had been routinely absorbed into broader departmental credit. The review also found 4 written requests I had submitted over 5 years asking for advancement consideration, and the responses, all politely deflecting, all promising future consideration, all arriving before Grant promoted Trevor or claimed departmental credit in all-hands meetings. Grant was asked to respond to the preliminary findings. His responses relied heavily on the framing he had always used: team performance, collective effort, departmental systems. But the documentation was specific. The account records were specific. The patterns in the data were specific. General framing does not hold up well against specific documentation. The review deepened. Leadership involvement widened. I was 3 weeks into building something genuinely mine while the thing Grant had built on top of my work began to show, clearly and in detail, exactly what it had always been built on. Harrow Logistics completed its transition to Northbridge at the 60-day mark. Priya's team was thorough, detailed, professional, committed to making it work. The onboarding took 3 intensive weeks. I was present for every significant conversation. By the time the formal handover was complete, the account was operating smoothly under the new structure. Priya's internal satisfaction metrics, the ones her company used to evaluate service relationships, were higher than at any point in the Veritas period. "This is what it's supposed to feel like," she told me in our first monthly review under the new arrangement. I thought about the 6 years I had spent trying to make it feel that way inside a structure that kept converting my results into someone else's story. 2 of Harrow's industry partners reached out to Northbridge in the months following the transition. They had noticed the change in Harrow's operational performance and wanted to understand what had changed. Daniel introduced me in both cases as the person who had built the model. Both became clients within 8 months. The division that had been a proposal when I signed my offer letter was becoming something real and growing. The results were mine. The credit was mine. The direction was mine. I was building a foundation. A real one. Grant's departure from Veritas Partners was announced 4 months after I left. The internal announcement used the standard language: organizational evolution, restructuring, gratitude for contributions. The kind of language that communicates a decision without explaining it. A former colleague relayed it to me and I thanked her and moved on. I did not spend much time on it. By then I was 4 months into building something that absorbed all my attention and most of my energy in the best possible way, and the internal politics of a company I had left felt genuinely distant. What I thought about, briefly, when I heard the news, was the performance report I had been holding the day Grant told me I had no future. The one with Harrow's numbers. The strongest numbers the department had seen in 2 years. He had not looked at it. That had always been the issue, not malice, not a calculated plan to keep me down, but the much simpler and more ordinary problem of a person who only looked at the things he already understood. What he already understood was presentations and leadership relationships and the language of strategic vision. He did not understand the work underneath those things. He found out what it cost him to have not understood. 8 months after I joined Northbridge, a former colleague reached out wanting to talk. She had been at Veritas for 7 years and was going through her own version of the ceiling conversation, the gentle but permanent deflection management uses when it has decided to keep someone in place. We met on a Saturday afternoon. She asked how I had known it was time to go. How I had been certain enough to leave stability for something uncertain. I told her the honest version. I had not been certain. I had been clear, which is different. Certainty is about the outcome. Clarity is about what you can see. What I could see, after the "no future" conversation, was that the value I had built was being permanently assigned to a place that was not assigning it back to me. And that the same value, in a different context, would be treated differently. I had not been chasing something. I had been following the logic of what I had built. She asked what the difference felt like. Before, I said, the work was mine but the outcomes weren't. Now both of them are. She nodded slowly. We finished our coffee. I think she had already made her decision. She just needed to hear it from someone who had been through it. The division had 6 people by month 10. Not because I had rushed, because the model was working and the work was accumulating in the way real work accumulates when it is actually landing correctly. Each client relationship we built became a reference for the next one. Each result produced documentation of what the approach could do. I was running something, genuinely running it, making decisions about structure and direction and people and service delivery, having those decisions produce outcomes that traced back to the choices I had made. The accountability was real and the authority was real, and both of them pointed at the same person. After 6 years of producing results that pointed at someone else, this was a different experience in a way I find difficult to describe precisely. I thought sometimes about the Veritas office. About the late evenings I had spent there producing things that became invisible. About the proposals I had fixed and the accounts I had saved and the relationships I had built and maintained through years of consistent follow-through. None of that had been wasted. All of it had been preparation. The skills I had built inside a structure that didn't see them clearly were the same skills producing visible results now. The work had always been real. The context had just needed to change. Grant told me I had no future at that company. He was right, not for the reason he meant, but because the specific future I was capable of building was not something that company's structure was designed to support. The ceiling he had decided for me was real inside that building, because he was the one who determined ceilings. My boss said I had no future at the company, then a competitor offered me something he couldn't match. What he couldn't match was not just the salary or the title. It was the thing underneath those things. A place where the work I did and the outcomes it produced were in the same sentence, with my name on it. A year after leaving, I lead a growing division. I have a team of 6 who chose to join specifically because of how I was building it. The clients I serve know exactly who is responsible for the results they see. The recognition goes where the work goes. I think about the hallway walk the day after his verdict. The cold, still feeling that settled into me. The inventory I ran of 6 years of work. The question I finally started asking. What is this worth, and where? Sometimes a ceiling is not a ceiling on you. It is just a ceiling on one specific building. You do not have to stay inside it.